Today, we are diving deep into a topic that honestly affects pretty much everyone, a lot of times without us even knowing it. We're talking about master manipulators. And we're not just going to learn how to spot them, we're going to learn how to use their own playbook as our best defense. So, let me ask you this. Have you ever met someone and they just seemed so genuine? You know, the conversations were amazing, you clicked on everything, and then boom, out of nowhere, they just completely violate your trust. And the really crazy part? You end up sitting there thinking, what did I do wrong? If that story sounds even a little bit familiar, well, you are definitely not alone. That feeling is a classic textbook sign that you've been manipulated. Because the most dangerous ones, they're the ones you never ever see coming. And you know, this brings us to a really big problem. For decades, scientists have been studying manipulators. But has any of that research actually helped the people on the receiving end? The short answer is not really. Look, professors who have spent their entire careers on this find it totally unacceptable. I mean, after 20 years of research, the conclusion is kind of stark. Science has gotten really good at defining what manipulation is, but it's pretty much failed to give any real tools to the victims. We've got piles of data on the what's, but almost nothing on the what to do about it. So, to figure out what to do, we've got to understand who we're up against. And in the scientific world, there's a framework for this. It's got a pretty intense name, the Dark Triad. For the longest time, the research on these personalities was all over the place. You had forensic experts studying psychopathy over here, clinical researchers studying narcissism over there, and behavioral folks looking at something called Machiavellianism. They were all in their own little silos. It wasn't until 2002 that two researchers, Delroy Paulhess and Kevin Williams, basically said, hey, maybe these things are connected, and they brought them all together under one roof, the Dark Triad. Okay, so we've all heard of psychopaths and narcissists, but what about that third one, Machiavellianism? It's a mouthful, I know. It comes from this old-school political advisor, Niccolo Machiavelli, who literally wrote the book on how to be ruthless to get ahead. At its core, this trait is all about being cautious, strategic, and cold-bloodedly rational in how you manipulate people. And this is where things get really crucial. Because while we're all trained to fear the impulsive, chaotic person, the truth is that a careful, calculated strategy is way, way more dangerous than a random impulse. There's this quote that just nails the difference perfectly. A narcissist needs you to admire them, right? They'll charm you. A psychopath acts on impulse. They might metaphorically or literally mug you. But a Machiavellian, they don't just want one thing from you. They invade you, your life, your job, your thoughts. And they do it all according to a plan. Let's just break that down a bit more. For a narcissist, the core driver is their ego. For a psychopath, it's just raw impulse. I want it, I take it. But for the Machiavellian, everything is driven by strategy. They are constantly weighing the pros and cons to get the maximum benefit for themselves. They're not the roaring lion you see coming. They are the lion you don't see, the one that's been stalking you for a mile, planning its attack. So that all sounds pretty terrifying, right? But here's the twist. What if we could flip the script on them? What if we could actually learn from their playbook, not to become them, but to defend ourselves? Which begs the question, is there actually an upside to this kind of thinking? Can we harness that strategic, emotionally detached mindset, not for evil, but for our own self-preservation? We'll get this. In one fascinating study, researchers looked at who did best when working for a really destructive, manipulative boss. And the answer was not what you'd expect. It was the people who themselves scored high in Machiavellian traits. They actually had better mental health and got more promotions. And why? Because they already knew the rules of the game. And that incredible insight is what leads us to something we can actually use, a concrete toolkit for those toxic situations you just can't walk away from. It's called the CBR method. The best way to think about this is to think about CPR. We all know CPR is a life-saving technique you use in a medical emergency, right? Well, think of CBR, which stands for cold, bottom line rational, as a survival technique for a relational emergency. So here's how it works. Step 1, cold. This means you have to be emotionally guarded. A manipulator's number one weapon is your emotions, your guilt, your desire to be charmed, your pity. You have to lock that down and deny them access. Step 2, bottom line. Before you even talk to them, decide the one single thing you absolutely need from that interaction and focus only on that. Everything else is just a distraction. And finally, step 3, rational. You have to make every fight about the outcome, not about principles or who's right. Because trust me, they don't have any principles. To really get that cold step to stick, just use this mantra. There's a story of someone who had a horribly abusive supervisor, and to cope, every time they had to talk, he would literally picture money pouring into his bank account. He wasn't dealing with a person, he was dealing with a transaction. A paycheck, not a pal. And this is exactly why you cannot let yourself get dragged into arguments about what's fair or right. It is a battle you will lose 100% of the time because they aren't playing by those rules. Your only goal is to focus on the tangible result you need. You're not there to win the emotional skirmish, you're there to win the financial or practical war. Okay, before we wrap up, we have to talk about something incredibly important, a massive ethical red line. Honestly, this might be the most important part of this entire discussion. And I absolutely cannot stress this enough. The CBR method is a defensive tool of last resort. It has zero place in a healthy relationship. Mutual respect, empathy, and open communication, that is always the goal. You only use this when you are dealing with a true dyed-in-the-wool manipulator. Your first, second, and third option should always be to get away or report them to HR. You use this only if you are completely stuck and need a way to survive until you can escape. So there you have it. You now have the tools not just to recognize strategic manipulation, but to respond to it. And that leaves you with one last question. In the chess match of a toxic interaction, knowing what you know now, who are you going to be? The player or the pawn?